Real quick, we're going to go over the Deyan editing specs cheat sheet, which is basically a reference of the things that you should be doing when you're editing. There is a reason for this kind of restructuring of how the manuals are presented. So we spent a little bit of a time trying to reverse engineer some issues that were happening in the audiobook workflow. Basically working backwards from publisher pickups, or anytime there was a hang up somewhere in a project, several of us tried to figure out why. And Jamie will tell you that the industry, the audiobook industry, has gone through lots of changes since he started working. And especially recently, the expectations are changing. There's shorter deadlines. The quality of work that goes into and out of the editing stage is way more variable than it used to be. And new clients have special instructions. Plus, there's going to be new technology that Deyan's using pretty soon that's going to change the workflow. As far as training used to go, when I started, there were 2 weeks of 8-hour days on real projects, and I had someone over my shoulder helping me. Now, I guess it's more of a virtual training in some cases, or test-based. And there's different ways that Deyan has of placing you as an editor or a QC in there. So the manuals need to kind of adjust to take into account from these things. From talking to people about the publisher pickups and the workflow issues, a few of the things that came up a lot were, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, or I don't know how to do that. Where do I go to find out how that works? And a lot of the problems were also because of time issues. Editors got parts later than they expected, and sometimes the project took longer than they expected. So if you're editing, you really need to budget your time for worst case scenarios and make sure you know who to ask your questions to quickly, and try to work on your efficiency of your projects rather than just working through them fast. There is a difference. So the way that the manuals are put together now should help with all of these things. So starting at the beginning, in the editing process, these 6 things should be on your mind all the time, and you can go over them individually to make sure that you understand what they are. Something that got lost in the mix somehow is that there have been editors who put pickup markers in sessions that are questions, like, should this be here, or is this right? At the editing stage, you should never put questions in sessions. You always need to ask someone directly. There's 2 big things that you do in the first pass of a project, and that's when you edit and when you put in pickups. So there are some questions about when you make an edit. And the answer to that is that you make an edit when you have to or when you can. And the best perspective for this is you should think like a publisher. If you listen to something and it's not right from a publisher's perspective, then you have to do something about it. If you can make an edit, if you can fix something by physically editing the session, you should. Or if you have to, like motion noise between words, you have to cut those out. Unscripted performance noises, you have to cut those out. As you get better at editing, you can do more with fixable misreads, but go through this list and make sure you understand what all of them mean and ask questions if you don't understand. That's when you make edits. When do you mark pickups? And the answer to that is that you mark pickups when you can't make an edit. So if you can do something to fix the audio, you should. But if you can't, that's when you have to mark a pickup. So missing audio is always a pickup because you can't fix that. If there are misreads that you can't fix, that's a pickup. Noise behind words that you can't fix, those are pickups. Understanding this list is very important as well. Standard pickup annotations. There are a lot of different people working on these projects, and there's sort of a missing standard about how people note different pickups. This is sort of a general list. We actually might be changing the P1012D thing soon, but the more standardized everyone gets eventually, the easier it will be to read, and the more understandable everyone will be when they clearly try to note pickups in PDFs. Pacing is another big deal with a lot of questions behind it. So this list is a bunch of average numbers of the number of milliseconds that you should have at certain edit points. Big thing to note is that you're working within a range based on context. If it's a fast scene, the room tone will be shorter. If it's a slow scene, they will be longer. But this is just a general kind of place to start. And there are specific things like scene changes and section breaks. Some client specs will give you exact numbers that you can't change. And the values at the bottom of the screen for the tops and tails, one of the first things you should do when you start a project is look those up. Also for pacing, and this is another set of questions that comes up. People are trying to understand what it means to work with the flow of a project. And so this is kind of a good way to check yourself internally. As you're feeling the pace of the narrator, you will find like a rhythm to it. And once you figure out the rhythm and you decide, well, a comma should have 35 milliseconds. Now, does 0.1 of a second matter? Like a tenth of a second, faster or slower from that speed? Probably not. If your comma is typically a 35, doing a 25 or 45 isn't going to pull anyone's ear away from it. Does 0.2 of a second matter? Maybe. If the normal pace is a 65 and you put an 85 in there, maybe it makes a difference. Sometimes it doesn't. 0.3 of a second probably makes a difference. So if between a paragraph, it should be around 100 milliseconds and there's 130 in there, that needs to be fixed for pacing purposes. And if it's close to a half a second off, every one of those has to get fixed. When you'll get comments back from publishers, sometimes they will say that a pause is a beat too long or a beat too short. Basically what that means is however the pace has gotten to them, they can feel that it's off and probably more than 0.2 or 0.3 of a second in one direction or the other. That's how some QCers will reference the fact that a pause is too long or too short. So work your way through all these. If you have any questions about what they are, ask someone. And this is a living manual, so it will be changing. And if there are any major updates, we will be sure to let everyone know.